What does Trump's peace plan have to do with the final 7 years? All this and more today on the Endtime Show. Welcome to the Endtime Show. Vince Stegall here with Doug Norvell. We're taking your calls today. The number to join us is 877-ENDTIME, 877-363-8463. Give us a call. We would love to hear from you. We're talking about ancient Shiloh today and the Red Heifer Ceremony. A perfect day for you to share this video, to comment your thoughts, and to give us a heart, not just the blue thumbs up. We really like seeing that heart come through. Helps us break through the algorithm and get to your friends and family. There's a lot happening with Bible prophecy and around the Red Heifer, and a lot of people are talking about this event. And so we are going to give you some information today that maybe you are unclear on, and it's connected to where the temple is going to be built, or whether or not there will even be a temple. Some people question that. Before we get into that, I want to ask you, have you been to endtime.com/switch yet? My friend, I've known him for about 15 years. He's a pastor here in the Dallas area. He posted something on Facebook last week. He actually became an ordained minister when I was initially getting my ministerial license, but he works for America's Christian Credit Union, and he received a message from another pastor whose church bank account is getting shut down from one of the big three banks. I don't remember which one it was, Chase, Bank of America, one of those guys. They're forcing him to...
Are you allowed to say?
What's that?
Are you allowed to say?
You know, as long as I don't say his name,
okay, there you go.
I think I'm allowed to say. Right. They're forcing this pastor to refinance his loan away from their bank, and he says this is the third time in 2 months that he's had this same conversation with Christians who've experienced the same exact thing. Now, the bright side is those folks switched to America's Christian Credit Union, where they can't be canceled for their biblical worldviews, become a part of the redeemed economy, and join ACCU today by going to endtime.com/switch. Make the switch to America's Christian Credit Union today. Go to endtime.com/switch. All right, Doug, we need a Red Heifer update. Before we do, we've got to talk about Shiloh, because I believe the Red Heifers are being housed in Shiloh, ancient Shiloh.
That's correct.
And people have posed the question, will there be a temple on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, which would be right off of the Dome of the Rock?
Right.
And some have speculated that it actually will happen in ancient Shiloh. So Here we go.
Yeah, so you're correct. This is where the Red Heifers are housed right now, Vince. So there are three at this point. We'll just kind of give you an update. There are three that still remain kosher. The fourth one is borderline right now. Of course, the fifth one was determined that it was unkosher shortly after they got to Jerusalem. So we're now looking at three. This is why we were talking about it would be in their interest to do it as close to that Passover as they could, to keep those red heifers from becoming unkosher, because anything can happen. The longer that cow lives, the more chance there is of a blemish or a spot coming up, or they could get some type of injury on barbed wire or something like that. So anyway, there are things that could happen. So right now, the way we're looking at it, the way we see it, and it's being reported to us, is we've got three that are still in the running, and they look like they're very much in the running. They've also begun to start trying to work on a program where they could use these red heifers in being able to breed and make more red heifers, to make sure that they keep a line of these pure red heifers going. And of course, there are still red heifers here that have remained unspot or unblemished here in Rockwall, Texas. There were I can't remember, Vince, do you remember 20?
23 is what's coming to mind,
okay.
But that might be because I grew up on Michael Jordan.
They're telling us in my ear 21, so that's probably true, because they have resources where they can look. So we still have at least 20 in Rockwall that could continue to be kosher. So there's still backup plan going there moving forward. Shiloh is where this location is, where these are housed. Our friend there in Jerusalem, who is close to our college, He went there not too long ago. He sent us some pictures back, and there were still 4 at that time that were kosher. Now, like I said, we are down to 3. So we'll keep you guys up to date on that. The last thing we heard from Byron Stinson is there might possibly be a small announcement in July that's telling us a little bit more information about where we're going with that. I reached out to him today. I did not receive any kind of information from him today. So he is either out of pocket or he's not able to talk to me right now because he doesn't want to spill the beans. So anyway, we'll see what happens with that. So
should Christians be looking for supporting and promoting the Red Heifer efforts? Let us know your thought in the comments. Doug, before we get into this Shiloh talk, I got to remind you, because one of my children's name is Shiloh. I've got 3 kids.
Yes.
One is named Shiloh. We've been having a problem at our house, okay? This is a problem that I need the experts, you guys out there, the end timers, I need their help with, okay?
Sure.
Somebody keeps closing our chicken coop door. One of the kids, Shirley. Every time I go out there, or multiple times a week, I go out there and I'm trying to get the chickens locked up for the night.
Right.
And the coop door's shut and they're not in the coop, and I have problems. Our chickens are pasture raised, they free range, and so there's not a pen. So nonetheless, it becomes a little difficult and frustrating. And last night,
chasing chickens around.
Yeah, last night, my oldest son, not named Shiloh, he said, I know who's doing it. I said, who? He said, Wendy from Georgia is coming here and sneaking in our backyard and shutting the door to the chicken coop. That's relevant because she's the one that calls me egghead. And so he apparently, I think it's him that's doing it, but he's trying to push it out on Wendy from Georgia. And that sounds like a good assessment from my perspective, because she would do that. If she lived close to me, she would sneak over and shut that door.
She might do it just as a joke between brother and sister in Christ, so who knows. But it's funny because we need to explain, too, that your children watch the program every day. And not only that, but they pretend to be the host of the Endtime Show.
Yes.
So they are very much in tune with the callers, and they're very much in tune with the end timers, so they know who you are because they hear your names all the time, and plus they watch every day.
Yes, they do. Yeah. So put Shiloh in the comments, not only for the story, but also we're talking about Shiloh. What do we need to know about Shiloh, Doug?
So
the place.
Yeah. So one of the questions that was posed to me, and this is why I looked at all this. Okay. So we're going to have a lot of information today about Shiloh, just because I had to research it in order to give you a good, thorough answer to a question that was posed to me. So today I received a question, and it sounded like this is a good time to talk about this because there is a lot going on in Israel, and we talk a lot about the war. I thought this will give us something good to talk about, something that's encouraging, something that's in history and also in Bible prophecy. So we'll talk about that a little bit today. But Shiloh in the Bible, it holds a significant historical as well as religious importance to the Israelites. Okay, so after the conquest of Canaan, Joshua first settled here. This is in Gilgal, before moving to Shiloh, where the tent and the meeting was set up for the Israelites to assemble. So the tent that we're talking about there is the tabernacle that they had in the wilderness, that God originally told Moses to build this tabernacle. And then this is also where the Ark of the Covenant was housed, and it had the holiest of holies as well as the Holy of Holies, and it had where God's Spirit would come down, and they would see God's Spirit there that would be in the dwelling place with the tabernacle. The tents of the Israelites would be placed around this tabernacle in the wilderness, and it made the shape of a cross. It's really cool when you look at that and you see that from the way it was set up with the different tribes and the way they set up their tents, where they're looking forward to the cross, and so they're always looking in expectation of what God's promise was, or at least He's laying it out for us, and it's significant there in that. But this is that same tabernacle that they set up there. So this is found in Joshua 18:1, and it says, "And the whole congregation of the children of Israel assembled together at Shiloh and set up the tabernacle of the congregation there, and the land was subdued before them." This is also where the central area was for dividing the promised land between the tribes, and it was a place where they would come for military and religious meetings. So they would actually have their feast here. Everybody would make the journey to Shiloh. That's where the Levite priests were. They would live there, and it contained the prominent worship center during the time of Judges. So when you're reading in your Bible, this is where they're worshiping in Shiloh. The early monarchy hosting annual feast and the Ark of the Covenant. In Judges 20:26, it says, "Then all the children of Israel and all the people went up and came into the house of God and wept and sat there before the Lord and fasted that day until evening and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. And the children of Israel inquired of the Lord, for the Ark of the Covenant was there in those days." So it's a significant place, and I think we've got time for a video. Do we have time?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, let's look at this video. This comes from CBN, and this is telling us some of the fascinating things that have happened in this area with the archaeologists there that have been digging. And this is part one of a two-part video I want to show you. So let's check this out.
2019, CBN News interviewed Dr. Scott Stripling, the director of the excavation going on in ancient Shiloh. This year, Stripling brought us up to speed on what's happened here since we first visited the project.
Tell us, we were there at season one. What's new? What's happened since then?
Well, in season one, our hypotheses were just formulating. We thought that we had a monumental building up here from the pier to the tabernacle. We thought that this could be a gate complex because there was no glacis in this section. Since then, we've come way down, 5 meters or so, maybe 6 meters in some places. And so now we can see the various structures that are here, and indeed we can now say that this is very likely the gate that's referred to in the Bible. And that's pretty big stuff.
And what happened at the gate? Why is this so important?
Well, the Bible tells us that Eli is in the gate of Shiloh when he gets the news that the Ark of the Covenant has been captured, that his sons have been killed. He falls over backwards and dies in the gate. Yeah. So it's a function that's mentioned in the Bible, so we were very curious if we would come across it.
Shiloh is not only where Eli lived and died, but also the place where Joshua divided the promised land between the 12 tribes, where Hannah prayed for a son who became the prophet Samuel, and where the tabernacle of the Lord stood for nearly 400 years. Stripling gave us a tour of the site and took us to perhaps their most significant discovery.
This is where you came to connect with God. Jerusalem remains a pagan city for another 300 years. The Ark is here, the tabernacle is here, and this is where you came to connect with God.
Okay, so you can see in that video, it's a pretty big complex that they're working on there, and they found this area, and you see a lot of stonework there. That's because it appears that what they did with the original tabernacle is they built stone around that tabernacle. So even though it was out in the desert, it was a tent that could be mobilized very quickly. They could take that down and they could travel. Because remember, the Israelites at that time, Vince, they were following the Lord, and they would follow him as a pillar of fire by night, a pillar of cloud by day. And so when the presence of the Lord would move, they would have to pack the tabernacle up and begin to follow the Lord, because he was leading them through the wilderness. Well, once they came to Shiloh, it became more of a permanent place, at least for a time. It was like 400 years. That's where it was. And so they made it more permanent by building the rock structure around the original tabernacle. The original tabernacle existed still, but they did build the rock around it, okay? So this is important too, because during Samuel's time, Shiloh was the central religious life. That's where Eli, like they talked about in the video, and his sons were serving as priests there. It's where Hannah, he said Hannah, but Hannah is the way we pronounce that. We also pronounce it Shiloh and not Shiloh. But Hannah prayed. I know some people think I'm mispronouncing it, but I'm not. This time I'm not.
Boiling oil?
Yeah. And Hannah prayed there for a child. This is where she dedicated Samuel to God's service, if you remember that story. So in 1 Samuel 3, it says in verse 20, "And all of Israel from Dan to even Beersheba knew that Samuel was established to be a prophet of the Lord, and the Lord appeared again in Shiloh. For the Lord revealed himself to Samuel in Shiloh by the word of the Lord." So this is all in the Bible. It's telling you about Shiloh. It's all through the history. So this lets us know how real our Bible is and how real the words of the Bible are, so you can understand that. But remember that this is also where Eli's son they had done evil in the eyes of the Lord. And so because they have done evil in the eyes of the Lord, and they were supposed to be priests of the tabernacle, then the Palestinians came in, or I'm sorry, the Philistines came in. We talk about the Palestinians all the time. I get confused there. The Philistines came in. They conquered Israel at that point. They beat Israel and took the Ark of the Covenant. They captured it.
And that was big
point.
news, Doug. Like when that happened, the news was everywhere. It's being spread around. Yeah. And when these things develop current day, we're going to be highlighting that news like, you're probably, if you don't like this subject, you're probably not going to really enjoy our show, because we've been talking about this coming for decades. Yeah. And when that happens, there's going to be new details every single day, Doug. Absolutely. And we're going to be shouting it from the rooftops, talking, well, not literally these days, but we'll be talking about it on the Endtime Show a lot. We'll be telling you all about it every single way that we can. When there's big news, you share it. That's how you do. And one big piece of news that hasn't been discussed that much is the fact that here in America, in our history, for the first time ever, we are paying more in interest on the national debt, surpassed every individual budget except Social Security. That's right. The U.S. now spends more on interest than on national defense or even Medicare. And it's only getting worse as big government continues to spend like crazy. That's why savvy investors, central banks, and concerned savers are turning to gold, something not tied to inflated U.S. dollar. You can too with the help of Birch Gold. For over 20 years, Birch Gold Group has helped thousands of Americans protect their savings by converting an IRA or 401k into an IRA or in physical gold. To learn more, visit birchgold.com/endtime. Claim your free no obligation info kit on gold. Go to birchgold.com/endtime today. So Doug, what happens next? They hear about this and then they're going to capture the ark. Is that correct?
Yeah, so they capture the ark. This is actually the point too, where they were talking about Eli finds out that his sons have been killed, and he falls back and breaks his neck in the fall and dies there too. So there's judgment that's come. The temple of Shiloh was, it stayed there, and it was important for a point, but the ark was gone from that. So after this defeat, Shiloh began to lose the importance of, the mainstay of the people. So eventually the temple of Shiloh, it was destroyed. They believe it was destroyed around 1050 BC, but some form of shrine persisted until 922 BC. Prophets like Jeremiah referenced Shiloh's ruins to warn Jerusalem of potential downfall due to corruption. Now remember, Jeremiah, known as the weeping prophet, he was sent out and he had to tell Israel of the bad things that were coming because of their behavior. So now we've got, here's Shiloh that he uses as a remembrance of what happened when they were disobedient to God. And so this is from Jeremiah 7, 12 through 14. It says, "But go ye unto my place which was in Shiloh, where I set my name at first, and see what I did to it for the wickedness of my people Israel. And now because you have done all these works, saith the Lord, and I spake unto you rising up early and speaking, but ye have heard not, and I call you, but ye answer not. Therefore I will do unto this house which is called by my name, herein ye trust, and unto the place which I gave to you and your fathers, as I have done in Shiloh." So that was a warning from God that the first temple was about to be destroyed and taken over, and they were going to be taken into Babylon captivity because of the wickedness, once again, of the people of Israel. There was judgment coming, and God brought the remembrance to Shiloh, that Shiloh had been destroyed, and now he's telling them this house where my name is also going to be like this. In Psalm 78, it tells us the Lord forsook the tabernacle of Shiloh. So Psalm 78, 60 through 64 says, "So that he forsook the tabernacle of Shiloh and the tents which were placed among men, and delivered his strength into captivity and his glory into the enemy's hand." Speaking of the Ark of the Covenant, he gave his people over also unto the sword, and he was wroth with his inheritance. And fire consumed their young men, and their maidens were not given in marriage. And their priests fell by the sword, and their widows made no lamentation. So this is talking about still the destruction of Shiloh in the book of Psalms. So just remember that God is illustrating a point, and this is what Israel was supposed to remember, is the things that happened to Shiloh, not to let these happen during the times of the temples as well. So that's the importance of Shiloh. And I mean, there's a whole lot you can learn about Shiloh. That's just what I had to squeeze in the time that we have today, because we moved from there to David building, or not building, but buying the threshing floor of Arana, buying the Temple Mount where the first temple stands. Eventually his son Samuel would come and build the temple to God, because God told David that he had too much blood on his hand to be the one to build the temple. So his son Solomon, I don't think I said Solomon.
You said Samuel.
I said Samuel, I'm sorry. Solomon built that first temple. So Solomon was the one that was allowed to do this. And those things are found in 1 Chronicles 13. They're found in 2 Chronicles 5. And those things tell us that they actually took the Ark of the Covenant out of the city of David, which is on Mount Zion, Vince. So when we go to Israel, Mount Zion sits to the southern side of Mount Moriah. It's down, like the southern steps are right across the street from King David's tomb and the city of David and everything on Zion. And it says in 2 Chronicles 5 that they took the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord up out of the city of David up to the Temple Mount. So that lets you know the location of the Temple Mount is the location where the Ark of the Covenant was and the temple was, okay, in the first temple era. So just interesting things. I know that we got business to take care of. I don't know if we'll have time to get to the second.
Well, we got another video. I think we're ready to go to that.
You want to get to that?
Yep.
Okay, well, let's go to the second video. This is part 2 from the CBN interview.
What I take from this is that God did something in history. He recorded it for us in the Bible. We have evidence of it here. One of the great things about our faith is that you can question it. God's ego isn't bruised. People have questions. Viewers do. That's honest. Express those. And I would just invite people to look at that evidence. And if they've bought into the idea that the Bible's mythology or it's not historical, I would encourage them to look at what we're finding here at Shiloh, read the text, pray about it, and decide for themselves.
And so this is where the Bible comes to life?
This is what we do. We don't just walk the Bible, we dig the Bible here at Ancient Shiloh. As we dig into the soil, we are literally seeing the evidence of what life was like in biblical times.
And nearby you also have a site of bones.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're in the bone business, Chris. Come on, I'll show you what it's all about.
Okay.
And this path is going to lead us to where the bone deposit is that we've been talking about. So the people working over here are doing something they'll never forget the rest of their lives. I mean, they are uncovering evidence of the sacrificial system. These were animals that brought expiation. I mean, it brought about the forgiveness of sin for people as they connected with God in this manner. So you'll see it for yourself. The pottery and the bones, they tell an unmistakable story that matches what we read in the biblical text. This entire area underneath our feet, Chris, this is unexcavated. Underneath your feet and my feet is about this much of solid bone waiting to be excavated. Bone on top of bone on top of bone. And we have microstratigraphy in this area so we can see that the deposition is laid down over a long period of time, just like the Bible says.
And what kind of bones would we find here?
Sheep, goat, cattle, and disproportionately from the right side of the animal. It's like just this morning, we're seeing disproportionate jaw bones from the right side as opposed to the left.
You described it before, but again, why is the right side so significant?
Well, the priests are the ones who live here, and Leviticus 7 tells us that the right side of the animal is the priest's portion. So I can't make this stuff up, you got 100,000 bones and they're disproportionate. Give me another explanation. Just happens to coordinate with what the Bible says.
So you see the significance of the question that was asked. They talked about, could the sacrifices begin there with these with the ceremony of the Red Heifer, and then start sacrifices originally there, and then move to the Temple Mount was the original question that was asked. But from what we've seen in Scripture, God has shut the door on Shiloh, and open the door on Jerusalem. And so Shiloh is done as far as a worship center. It's done. It was the time of the tabernacle. It was not the time of the temple. Now we're into the temple era. We're actually in the third temple era right now. The reason why it was significant to show you about the bones is because, like he said, the Leviticus priests lived there, and they were given that from the sacrifices. They were given the right side of the animal, and that's why that was so significant. The Bible
you're
just
talking about
is
the
coming
Jewish
alive.
faith,
Yeah.
not the Christian faith.
Right. Yeah, and this is definitely Old Testament. That's all Old Testament is what we're seeing there. So these are Old Testament Levi priests, and they were getting their portion of the sacrifice. And so, I mean, the Bible just jumps right off the pages at you when you see stuff like that. That's what's so significant about going to Israel.
Yeah, of course, we know and proclaim that we don't need a third temple to be built as born-again believers.
Right.
We don't need the red heifer sacrifice as born-again believers. We do believe that prophecy makes it pretty clear that there is going to be a third temple. And Doug, perhaps on the other side of the break, we can talk about why that's important for it to be in Jerusalem as opposed to Shiloh or anywhere else, or whether or not there'll even be one. Some people say there's not even going to be a physical building for the temple. Right. So we'll have to address that on the other side of the break when we have a little bit more time. I do want to remind you about First Cup Coffee. They're a Christian-owned Patriot Coffee Company out of the great state of Texas. Some of my favorite coffee that I've ever had. Though the cup in Jericho was pretty nice too, Doug. It was Turkish coffee, so it was a little different. If you've never had that, you should try it. First Cup doesn't have that option. Nonetheless, they do have 11 different roasts, each one named after a specific piece of American history. You can get one of their roasts by going to firstcup.com. Use code ENDTIME to get 10% off. If you subscribe, they'll actually give you another 10% off. So make sure you use code ENDTIME when you go to firstcup.com. And Doug, on the way out, our audio engineer has a birthday coming up. We're not going to be on the show for the rest of the week. We don't have a graphic this year. We went easy on him. Last year we had a saxophone playing. But put happy birthday Jim in the comments
Happy birthday,
to show
Jim.
Jim some love. We'll be right back.
A voice spoke to me and said, I've got something I want to show you. I was so sure God had talked to me. And I was stunned by what I saw.
A direct fulfillment of this over 2,500-year-old prophecy. The United States will stand with Israel.
Why haven't I ever seen this before?
1/3 of humanity will die. What do these beasts symbolize?
The lion, the bear, the leopard.
The combined beast from Revelation 13 represents the end-time government of the Antichrist. Understanding the end time.
Now streaming on Endtime Plus and available to order at endtime.com/UET. Go to endtime.com/UET or call 800-ENDTIME.
What if you could understand Bible prophecy? Dave Robbins, the host of the Endtime Show's TV and radio programs, is holding a free prophecy conference near you. Gain peace and understanding about what the Bible says concerning end-time prophecy. Call 1-800-ENDTIME or go to endtime.com/events to see when Dave will be in a location near you.
Welcome back to the Endtime Show. Vince Stegall here with Doug Norvell. We're so happy you've joined us today. We have open lines at 877-ENDTIME, 877-363-8463. You can go to endtime.com/events, not just to learn about when Dave is going to be near you, but also Doug. Doug and Tina Norvell will be in Bunkie, Louisiana. Doug, have you ever been to Bunkie before?
Not that I know of.
I've never heard of Bunkie.
Maybe I've passed through it shortly when I was going somewhere.
What's the big city near Bunkie? Do you know?
I have no idea.
Well, I guess if someone's out there near Bunkie, they know. But
I guess.
make plans. In July, Doug and Tina Norvell will be in Bunkie, Louisiana. So go to endtime.com/events to learn more about the specifics for that venue and conference. You don't have to RSVP. but it is first come, first serve. So get the information and make plans to come out and meet Doug and Tina Norvell there. Also, I mentioned right before the break, of course it had to be that way, it's Jim's birthday this Thursday, Doug. He's the audio engineer. If you go to church anywhere, you've heard audio engineer jokes, the soundboard guy. They never get any love. Right. And of course, and unintentionally, I had to mention it right before the break so we couldn't highlight him near enough.
Right.
But even our audience, Doug, when the sound is off, they're sure to let us know.
Oh, yeah.
We see it in the comments.
Yes, we do.
However, when they can hear us loud and clear and everything's just fine, no one's ever saying Jim's killing it today in a good way.
Right.
So make sure that you put happy birthday Jim in the comments to show him how much he is loved in spite of, he's never in front of the camera, or rarely, I would say. Yeah. And so he doesn't.
But they do hear his voice. That was him on the commercial right before we came back.
The conference commercial,
yeah,
absolutely.
That's Jim.
So be sure to put that in the comments. Let him know how much you appreciate all the hard work he does with audio. Without him, you're not hearing us anywhere. So appreciate Jim very much. I have a long history with Jim that we won't get into in this show.
That's probably a good thing. But I know a little bit of the history.
I just can't help myself sometimes. But hey, let's go to Georgia and see what Wendy has to say.
Okay.
Wendy from Georgia. Wendy, you been coming to my house shutting my chicken coop door?
Yeah, with your son's help.
Oh, with my son's help. My.
Okay, Egghead. And Doug.
Hey, people out there get on to you when you call me Egghead, just so you know, Wendy.
Well, they don't know our love history.
I don't either, Wendy.
There you go.
Doug?
Yes.
You better back me up.
I got your back, Wendy. I know that you and Vince are great friends, and you do everything you do out of love. I know that.
That's right.
Put Wendy in the comments.
Yeah.
Okay, Duke and Vince. Doug. Stupid question. Where is the old Shiloh?
Well, it's not too far from Jerusalem. I don't know exactly where it's at. I know that it's up close to the Sea of Galilee, up in that area. So it's closer to Galilee and the northern part of Israel. I don't know exactly because I haven't had the opportunity to go there yet. I'm hoping that when we get to go back to Israel that maybe we'll make a stop there. We talked about it on the last tour that I was on back in the spring last year before the war happened. But since the war, we haven't really been able to go north, even when the tour was there, yourself. There was talk that maybe the group could go up and see the Red Heifers, but that y'all weren't able to because of what happened with the war. So hopefully after the war's over and we start the tours back up, that will be a spot that we will get on the agenda and be able to go up there and see, because not only would it be great to go up there and see the Red Heifers, but it would be really cool to go up and see this area where the tabernacle once stood.
Well, Doug, according to my search engine here, Shiloh is 20 miles north of Jerusalem.
All right, there you go.
Okay, thank you. Because I was wondering where it was.
Yes, ma'am.
Well,
hopefully, maybe someday, Wendy, you'll be able to go on another tour and you'll be able to go see it for yourself.
Yes, that would be fine.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, Wendy, thanks so much for your call. We appreciate it very much. If you had no idea what that little inside joke about the chicken coop was, that means you joined us a little later and missed out on a very interesting story at the beginning of the show. So you have to go back and watch that, because I guess we'll not retell it again. Doug, anything else we need to cover before we go to the next call?
Well, one of the things that I want to help everybody understand is I said before the break that we're in the Third Temple era now. And so one of the things that they were talking about in this question was, could the ceremony take place and the ashes be produced and then sacrifices actually start in Shiloh? We don't believe so. One of the reasons is where they were doing the Red Heifer ceremonies in the Second Temple era were on the Mount of Olives. It's the same place where they own the acre of land right now, where they're going to be able to resume this ceremony. And back in the Second Temple era, there was a bridge there that was it was a special bridge that was made just for this Red Heifer ceremony, and also for the scapegoat ceremony, the scapegoat where you would pass your sins on to an animal that would be sacrificed, and that is on a spot called the Mount of the Anointment at the Temple Mount, or at the Mount of Olives, across from the Temple Mount. It's across the Kidron Valley, looking directly at the Eastern Gate. So that is where they're going to do these Red Heifer ceremonies, when they're able to do those, because that is the way that it was established during the Temple era, and that's the way it'll be reestablished for this Third Temple timing. And so, Vince, we know that, you know, the book of Revelation, we talked about it yesterday, how it's written in the things that thou hast seen, the things which are, and the things that must be hereafter. Everything after chapter 4 is prophecy. It's the things that must be hereafter. And John wrote in Revelation 11:1 about the sharing of the Temple Mount, when he says, and there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and an angel stood saying, rise and measure the temple of God, and the altar, and them that worship therein. So this is a functioning worship center, a functioning temple where there are sacrifices, because there's an altar and there's worship going on there. And it says, but the court which is without the temple, leave it out and measure it not, for it is given to the Gentiles, and the holy city shall be tread underfoot for 42 months. This is telling us that there's going to be a sharing arrangement. The Dome of the Rock, which you see in all the pictures of the Temple Mount, is a Muslim area. That is the Dome of the Rock is where they believe the original rock surface is exposed, and they've built this golden dome over it, and it is a form of worship center there. The Al-Aqsa Mosque is a little bit further out, and this Dome of the Rock would line up perfectly with what this scripture is saying, based on where they believe the holiest of holies was. The Dome of the Spirits is what it's called right now. They believe this third temple can be built right there, and you would leave out the outer court, because that's where the Dome of the Rock is. So Revelation 11:1 gives us that information. We've talked before about Trump's peace plan, and how he said in the original peace plan, the peace for prosperity, that all nations should be able to come to Jerusalem and worship there with respect to all the other religions there. So it would be a place of worship for everybody, all nations. And Zechariah 8:22 tells us that. So that's in Scripture, tells us that's going to happen, and that is part of the vision there for that peace treaty. So most everybody knows the rest. If we have time, we might touch on some more prophecy there and explain it a little better, but we've got calls, so we can go to the calls.
All right, we'll go to Tennessee now. John is watching there. John, welcome to the Endtime Show.
Good afternoon.
Hello, John.
How you doing?
Good. Anyway, how are you?
Well, I'm not too bad. Not too bad. I'm doing better than I probably have any right to be.
You sound pretty good today. That voice sounds strong.
Well, I'm getting a little more back, I think.
All right.
You know,
very good.
Kind of froggy, but I'm getting a little more back. Anyway, I think that people should be a little cautious about thinking that the temple would be built anywhere except the dome, except the Mount Moriah, because God said He would put His name there, and if I'm not mistaken, there is a geographical feature on one corner that matches up to the Hebrew spelling of His name.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. That's right. We actually might have a picture of that. Can we throw that picture up there, guys? We'll see if we've got a picture of that.
The picture, because that's where I saw it.
There it is. So if you see that, I know you might not be able to see it, John, because you're on the phone with us, but we've thrown up.
I'm looking right at the screen.
All right, there you go. You see that topographical.
I'm a few seconds behind on the screen as opposed to the phone.
Yeah, so that is called the Shem, which is the letter that means God in the Hebrew language. And as you see there, it shows you where the temple would be, where the Kidron Valley is, where the Rephaim Valley. And so those valleys make up the letter that means God, with the dot being where the temple would have stood. So that in the original Hebrew, it is this symbol that looks kind of like an E laying on its side, with a dot above it. And so, yeah, that's the Lord said, I'll write my name in Jerusalem, I think 34 or 36 times in the Old Testament. And there it is. He's actually got it in the topographical.
He's already signed the place he wants his temple to be. So
yes, sir.
I think the people that are thinking that they might build it elsewhere are just thinking of any way they can to avoid the problem and the tribulational difficulties that are going to happen because they want to build it there.
Mm-hmm.
But God never took a sidestep and said, well, let's avoid problem and do it over here.
Right.
I mean,
and
whenever he told somebody to do something, that's it.
Absolutely. And also, one of the things about it, John, the reason why it's important that the Jews have this area there is if they were to build something in Shiloh and begin to have sacrifices out there, all of a sudden all the Arabs in all the world would say, look, the Temple Mount is not important to Israel. They don't need this Temple Mount. So let them build their temple out in the desert. And this is our area now. This is where we belong. And that's what Satan's wanted ever since God said, I'll put my name there. And so if Israel stops going to that Temple Mount, if the Jews stop pilgriming up there and making these pilgrimages up there, they're going to let the world know, hey, this isn't as important to us as we tell everybody. It's their most holy site in the whole world. It's Islam's third holy site.
Yeah, so it's not a good idea for people to even suggest that they do it anywhere else except where God wanted them to do it, where David spent the money to buy the floor from Arana and got it taken care of anyway.
Yes, sir.
Secondly, Vince, you need to put a latch of some kind on the upper portion of your chicken house door, out of the way of and the reach of your chicken wranglers, so that you can avoid them shutting the door prematurely.
Yeah.
This has been a helpful suggestion brought to you by me.
Oh, I appreciate the suggestion. However, the door is too low, so they will be able to reach it. So.
Well, then you're going to have to put a pinnable pin through the door somewhere that's attached to the thing, so you can.
There we go.
So you can put a little lock or something into it.
There you go.
Yeah. Well.
He threatened to put a camera up there. He said, if I had a camera up there, would I see you opening this door, Brady? And Brady said, you wouldn't see me because you don't have a camera.
Sounds like way too much technology going into a chicken house.
Right.
You're right, John. I'm not paying any more money for those chickens.
That'd be like saying I'm going to put up a 24-hour-a-day drone with an attack missile in it.
Hey, I like it, John.
Wow.
Appreciate your call. God bless you. We have open lines. We'll get to the Joe Show after the break, and then give us a call. You'll be able to get on the show today. 877 Endtime's the number to join us. We'll be right back. Chicken drum.
They that understand what is taking place will instruct many.
Except a man is born again, he can enter or see the kingdom of God.
I don't care what label you've been given or what label you've given yourself. You are essential. You still matter.
This is a journey, and when we get to the other side of that, that's where our prize is. That's where our reward is.
End time is not going anywhere.
Welcome back to the Endtime Show. Vince Stegall here with Doug Norvell. We have open lines at 877 Endtime, 877-363-8463. Put chicken drone in the comments. Sometimes I say things when we go to break, Doug, and I'm not muted yet. And so apparently you all heard me say chicken drone, which sounds like a great idea to me.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to New York now. Joe is watching from there. Joe, welcome to the Endtime Show.
Good afternoon. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling great, Joe. Thanks for asking.
Okay, I was going to discuss something on my mind, but my mind totally changed because we got this here chicken problem. And what I would recommend...
Now, I'm taking chicken advice from a New Yorker?
Well, you see, the thing of it is what I've learned. And I'm coming up pretty quickly on 77, so I have a lot of years. No matter how slow my brain works, I keep learning. But you take the situation with the chickens and the chicken coops, and I don't know how big a property you have that these chickens run around with, but you can turn it into a growing thing for your children. Being that you're the dad and you say what goes, I would suggest that you make your children sit down with you and learn about chickens.
We do that.
Go to Wikipedia and do research. But you see, you're taking a problem and you're making it into a learning tool. And the family time together, that's terrific. I'm sure you spend much time with your
We actually go to the library, Joe, and we rent books from the library about it. We're those weirdos.
No, that's good. So you take the thing about the chicken coop, however you work out the details, you'll be building, respect in your children, number one, for you taking the time to sit down with them. And like I said, a good way of learning is if you have a nice-sized computer and you go to Wikipedia and you make it a family thing, learning about the kinds of chickens that you have and the proper way to build a chicken coop and the importance that you see that the chickens are in the right place at the right time. But you see, you're taking a problem and you're resolving the problem by making it a learning tool. That's the important thing. It doesn't matter if it's chickens, birds, gorillas. I'm not talking about the animals. I'm talking about using that particular experience as a family learning tool. And I've learned throughout my life, when I sat down with my children, and I have 4 children, they're all grown adults now, but when they were little, whenever we did something together, whatever it was, and back, when they were youngsters, I didn't have a computer. We would sit down with things, tools that I had. But the important thing was sitting down and them learning firsthand. See, we say very easily, "I love you," and that's a given. God is love, and He wants us all to love each other. But their actions speak louder than words. And sitting down and taking a chicken situation and turning it into an enjoyable experience where everybody learns. And I'm not talking like I'm some expert about chickens. I'm not talking about the chickens. I'm talking about turning that around so it's no longer a problem. You'll see. They will stop screwing around with the door, and they'll listen to you.
One day. Appreciate it, Joe. Did
God
your
bless you
other
guys.
thought come to your mind in the process?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Did your
Vince,
other
you
thought?
said something?
Did your other thought come to mind during the process?
Well, the thing that I was curious about, the red heifers, how do they inspect them, and what are they looking for? That you said some get disqualified, but what are any kind of maybe you can explain that. I don't really understand what that procedure is. I'm curious.
Sure. So they're looking for any place where there's more than 3 white hairs that are gathered together in one spot. It can't have, it can have a random white hair somewhere and not be completely red, but if there's 3 or more together, that is considered a spot. Or if they have a blemish. When I say blemish, if something were to happen to that animal, like one of the ways that they were able to get these over there, they didn't have to tag these animals because they were born during COVID. And normally you have to tag animals here in the United States, but during that time of COVID here in Texas, they passed that process to where they didn't have to tag these animals. So these animals were not even tagged, and they shipped them over there as pets. And that way they didn't have to have any kind of tagging or chips put in them because they were going as pets and not as livestock that was going to be used for meat or anything like that. And so they're looking for any kind of blemish to where if it was to, like if one of those got injured in some way, then that would be a blemish. You know, if it rubbed up against a fence or something like a barbed wire fence. I don't even know if they have barbed wire around these animals. I haven't been there to see it. But out here in Texas, barbed wire is the way you keep your cattle in a fenced in area, and it has the sharp barbs on there, and they can cut into cowhide. And so if something like that was to happen, they would become blemished. So these are things that they inspect every day, making sure that they don't have 3 or more of those white hairs together in one spot, make sure that they don't have any blemishes.
So they're probably pampering those creatures.
Yes, sir, they are indeed pampering. They probably are living better than a lot of people are living. So yes, sir.
I wouldn't be surprised, but that's good. You know, I mean, the evidence that there's going to be a third temple. I mean, they're all prepared from the things that I heard from you guys. They've been prepared for a while that they could build this temple within a year. I think it was the last time I heard you guys mention that they have everything, the priests trained and all the implements built and all the
that's correct.
Blueprints. They're all ready to build it, right?
Yes, sir. That's right.
So that's evidence to the world that there's going to, you know, I mean, it's got to happen. I mean, we know the scriptures, but
right.
as far as, you know, the unsaved world and trying to analyze everything, I mean, that's evidence. Why,
yes, sir.
Why would they do this if they weren't planning? And we know they're going to execute it. We know it's going to be built. There's no shadow of a doubt there. I mean, that's true. But, you know, the world is over analyzing everything, and well, we know most of the world is against Israel, and that's satanic.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir, it is.
But I love you guys. I keep praying. A word out to my brother John in Tennessee. His name is in my prayer journal. I'm praying for him to have complete recovery and to be healthy. Healthier than the chickens.
And the red heifers. Thanks for your call, Joe. Appreciate it very much. God bless you.
Guys. I love you.
We always love hearing from you, Joe. God bless you. All right, we're going to Minnesota now. Karen's watching there. Karen, welcome to the Endtime Show.
Hi. I've been reading a book that I think you might be interested in. It's called Unmasking the Chaldean Spirit by Rabbi Zev, I don't know how to pronounce this for sure, P-O-R-A-T. Are you familiar with him at all?
I am not.
I'm not. No,
okay. There's a Baptist pastor that has also written a book about him, and it's very interesting. But him and a bunch of other people are convinced that the places where Jesus was crucified was not where the tourist places are. And so they've been looking and researching this, and they've come to the conclusion that it's where the third temple near the summit of the Mount of Olives, and it's in Upper Mount Moriah, and they're convinced that that is where the Son of God was crucified. And so they're saying almost the same place of what you are saying, if I'm understanding this right, where you are saying the mount is supposed to be built. So if you want to do research on it, you can read that book, or you can look it up. There's a lot of people that were involved in this research, and so that's what they're saying. They're saying it's exactly the same place where the priest burned the heifer.
All right, well, that's interesting. Thank you. And we'll check into it and see what we think.
Okay, that'd be good.
All right, thank you,
Just
Karen.
Wanted you to know.
All right.
Yeah. Thanks, Karen. God bless you. Doug, regarding Karen mentioning this, how the exact location is unknown. Mm-hmm. You know, when we go to Jerusalem and around Israel, we take people to the tourist sites, of course. There are some things that we can pretty well know for sure. There's some things we cannot know. Right. Where Jesus' tomb is, there is a generally accepted location for that. we know that that may not be 100% accurate, but we kind of have the area down, and there is a tomb there that they acknowledge. Same with the where he was crucified. So there's a church built where he was supposedly born. So there's places like that all around Israel, and we take people there, and it is an incredible experience. But we're not highlighting that this is necessarily the exact location. That is not where change happens. That is not where the good experience comes necessarily. But it really does put us in that position from 2,000-ish years ago.
Right.
And it helps us to see kind of how it would have been. And we tell the story. And so we talked about this before, that, you know, maybe this event happening is not the fulfillment of this Bible prophecy.
Right.
We aren't sure yet. But what it is doing is causing people to talk about Jesus, causing people to talk about what the Lord has done.
Exactly.
And so we will take people to these locations and talk about what happened, and we will rejoice in what the Lord has done. And it has helped millions of people at this point in their discipleship journey with the Lord. And so we don't profess that we know exactly where it was, and we probably aren't going to start doing that unless there's some miraculous discovery.
Right.
But we'll be talking about those events from now until Jesus comes.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I mean, when we go, we don't go to the typical places.
That's true.
That most people go to. We do go to what we believe is the Golgotha, the place of the skull. And that is real close to the garden tomb, like within 100 yards.
Right.
And that's what Scripture talks about, is the place where Jesus was crucified was not far from the garden tomb. They had to take him down in a rush because it was beginning to get evening time, and it was a high Sabbath, and they had to have Jesus buried before sunset that evening. And so Golgotha looks a lot different now than it did in those days. When we go there, they have a picture from the 1800s that shows Golgotha the way more like it would have looked. And it was on a major thoroughfare coming into the city of Jerusalem, and that's why they believe that's where Jesus was crucified, and not necessarily on the top of the mountain. It would have been close to the road where people would see it and know that you don't mess with the Roman government, because this is what will happen.
Yeah, and that's another, I think, a valid point, is it wasn't that they picked a special location because it was Jesus.
Right.
This is where they would typically do crucifixions.
Yeah, it was an
that way folks
execution
coming
place.
in would know, like,
Right.
we shouldn't mess around here.
Yeah.
And there would be bodies there, and it would be quite morbid.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, it was not a pleasant sight, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, you know, we don't know for sure, but there's even been some archaeology, however you say that.
Archaeological?
Yes. Findings that they found at the tomb that they say reference Roman-built construction, and they believe that could actually be the tomb. But, you know, once again, we do not know for 100%.
Much like many other things, there's a lot of moving parts, Doug.
Oh, way to work that in.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to go to endtime.com/summer to see all the summer sales, which include Endtime Plus for less than $6 a month when you use code YouTube. That'll be there for a few more weeks until we make a very special announcement that I can't reveal today. We're out of time, Doug.
Oh.
Unreal. Out of time. Can't talk about it. So we'll be right back here tomorrow at 3 p.m. Central Time. Don't forget to go to endtime.com and watch.endtime.com. Have a great evening. God bless.